I resolve to claim all my pets as dependables on my taxes. Maybe next year's resolution is to get out of jail. I resolve to check my work email at least once this year. I resolve to stop buying worthless junk on eBay because Craigslist has better deals. I resolve to lose weight by inventing an anti-gravity machine. I resolve to eat more fruit, snacks. I resolve to become as wonderful of a person as my dog thinks I am. Hopefully your resolutions are not quite as silly as these. Hopefully you have made some resolutions. Of course, it can be kind of humorous, and we've probably all joked about the idea of New Year's resolutions at one time or another, but I think they're important. I think that we should always be striving to be better people. I never want to get to the point that I'm just content to stay the way that I am. I plan on doing my best to better myself until the day that I die. Now, obviously, you don't just have to stick to making resolutions at the beginning of a new year. It's a good time for it. I hope that the primary focus of your resolutions or goals for the new year is on your relationship with God. I hope that your supreme desire is to draw closer to Him, to know Him better every day, to experience true spiritual victory. My hope for our church is that we will especially seek His presence and the power and the help of the Holy Spirit. And I believe that God will move in response to hearts that truly seek Him. Of course, God can work any way that He wants to, and He often does work in other ways. But I believe that God most often moves in response to the prayers of His people. He wants us to be an invested part of His work. He created us for communion and fellowship with Him, and He uses us to accomplish His purposes. He allows us to participate in the work that He's doing. It really is an incredible privilege that the Creator of the universe, the one about whom Psalm 95 and verse 4 says, "In His hand are the depths of the earth. The heights of the mountains are His also," that He would give us the opportunity to be a part of His work. Not only does He move in response to our prayers and give us the chance to work with Him, He gives those of us who are His children victory. If we're working alongside Him and doing His work, then we know that we're on the winning side. It's like the evangelist I heard hold up his Bible and say, "I've read the back of the book and we win." God's word tells us that the gates of hell shall not prevail against His church. If you're on God's side, if you're a part of the church, if you're unified with what the church is doing, you are guaranteed victory. As an individual member of the church, you're guaranteed victory. 1 John chapter 5 and verse 4 says, "For everyone born of God overcomes the world." This is the victory that has overcome the world, even our faith. If you're a child of God, victory is yours. We talk a lot in the church world about surrender. And the beautiful thing about surrender in the life of the believer is that it's the only way to victory. And just like there will be new areas, deeper depths, higher heights of surrender that for you to come to all throughout your walk with Christ, it stands to reason, since surrender and victory are so closely connected for God's people, there will also be new levels of victory throughout the life of a Christian. God has promised us victory. It's essentially already ours, but you can still miss out on it if you're not careful. It's a lesson that we can learn from the children of Israel in the land of Canaan. God had promised them victory. In fact, He had already granted them many victories. A few chapters before, they followed God in obedience, even when it didn't make sense, and God gave them victory over Jericho. They took care of sin in their midst. When Achan disobeyed a direct command from God, they came back to a place of total obedience, and God gave them another big victory at Ai. It was a time when God was certainly moving in their midst. They were responding in obedience, and God was granting victory after victory after victory until it was time to take possession of the land that they had been promised. Joshua had led the people well, and the land was now firmly under Israel's control. God had given them victory, but they hadn't conquered every city. God deliberately left little pockets of resistance in order to test the commitment and resolve of the people. God had commanded that the land be divided into sections that corresponded to the size of each tribe. And they were each going to get their fair share of land, but they were still going to have to do some working. They were still going to have to do some fighting. Judah was the largest tribe, so they were given their territory first. And Joseph, which was the combination of Ephraim and the half-tribe of Manasseh, that tribe received its land next. And let's look at Joshua chapter 17. We'll read verses 14 to 18 to see the response of Joseph's people to their allotment of land. Verse 14, then the people of Joseph spoke to Joshua, saying, why have you given me but one lot and one portion as an inheritance, although I am a numerous people, since all along the Lord has blessed me? And Joshua said to them, if you are a numerous people, go up by yourself to the forest, and there clear ground for yourselves in the land of the Perizzites and the Rephaim, since the hill country of Ephraim is too narrow for you. The people of Joseph said, the hill country is not enough for us. Yet all the Canaanites who dwell in the plain have chariots of iron, and both those in Bethshan and its villages, and those in the valley of Jezreel. Then Joshua said to the house of Joseph, to Ephraim and Manasseh, you are a numerous people and have great power. You shall not have one allotment only, but the hill country shall be yours. For though it is a forest, you shall clear it and possess it to its farthest borders. For you shall drive out the Canaanites, though they have chariots of iron, and although they are strong. They came to Joshua and they were upset. Why did we only get one lot? We've got way more people than can fit on this little bit of land. But Joshua was a wise leader. He knew the real reason that they were upset. They were lazy and scared. Part of their territory included a large forest in the hill country, but they didn't want to clear it and defeat the Rephaites who lived there. Their territory also included the valley land, but they were afraid of the iron chariots of the Canaanites. They had been promised victory. It was essentially already theirs. But if they didn't follow Joshua's instructions, they'd have missed out on the full measure of victory that God had for them. The tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh can teach us some valuable lessons on how to miss out on victory that's already ours. Let's look at them together today. Number one, comparison. Joseph's tribes looked at the land of the tribe of Judah had gotten, and they immediately began to play the comparison game. How come they got all that land and all we get is this? Falling prey to the trap of comparison will rob you of victory. I read a story about a guy. He walked out into the street just in time to flag a taxi that was driving by. And as he got in, the driver said, perfect timing. You're just like Dave. Who? Taxi driver said, Dave. A guy who did everything right, like my coming along just exactly when you needed a cab. It would have happened like that to Dave. Well, nobody's perfect, said the passenger. Dave was pretty close. He was a terrific athlete. He could have gone on the pro tour in tennis. He could golf with the pros. He sang like an opera baritone, and he danced like a Broadway star. Wow, he really was something, huh? Oh, yeah. He had a memory like a trap. He could remember everybody's birthday. He knew all about etiquette. He knew which fork to eat with. He could fix anything. Not like me. I change a fuse and I black out the whole neighborhood. No wonder you remember him. It's like, well, I never actually met Dave. The passenger said, well, then how do you know so much about him? Well, because I married his widow. You ever been like that cab driver? Feeling like you just never quite measure up to the standard that somebody else has set. Anybody ever been there before? I have. It sure can be frustrating. Maybe we look around and we see people with so many accomplishments under their belts. They've achieved more than we could ever dream of, and we feel a little inadequate. Maybe there's somebody else in our life that compares us to others and makes us feel that way. The truth is, if you compare yourself to other people, you can always find someone that's better than you. You can always find somebody that makes you feel inadequate. You can also find somebody who's way worse than you and make yourself feel pretty superior. But listen to the words of the Apostle Paul found in 2 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse 12. Not that we dare to classify or compare ourselves with some of those who are commending themselves. But when they measure themselves by one another and compare themselves with one another, they are without understanding. Those who compare themselves with one another are lacking in understanding, and it's a thief of victory. There are so many pitfalls in the area of comparison. It's hard to know which ones to focus on. It's such a dangerous area of spiritual defeat in so many ways, and yet we're tempted to compare in so many different ways. We compare lifestyle. Do the choices that these people are making, do they line up with the choices that I make? We even compare testimonies and spiritual journeys, stories of victory. Ephraim and Manasseh, they were comparing their story of victory to Judah's. We do the same thing. Man, my story doesn't look the same as theirs. Did I really get the victory that I thought that I had? Or maybe it's an issue of pride and we compare in the other direction. Do we compare our lives to the sinners around us and essentially puff out our chests in righteous indignation at the messiness in their lives? We may not say it out loud, but maybe our attitude is the same as that Pharisee that was praying on the street corner. God, thank you that I'm not like these sinners, like these people. Surely no one here would actually say that. But how many of us say it with our actions? We neglect to meet the needs of those around us, and maybe we excuse ourselves by saying something like, well, that's just the consequences of their own choices, the consequences of their sin. It's likely true, but I sure am glad that God didn't choose whether or not to reach out to me based on the choices that I have made. I had to confront a church member who was sowing dissension in the church one time. Well, I confronted them one time. They were sowing dissension a lot more than one time, which is why I had to do that. At one point, not here in this church, at one point during our conversation, the individual expressed displeasure that a person in our church was allowed to volunteer for certain ministries. They said, if you only knew this person's past, you wouldn't be using them in the church. And I said, if you knew my past, I wouldn't be your pastor. That Pharisee who stood on the street corner, his whole life was wrapped up in the fact that he didn't do bad things, but he didn't have victory because he was playing the comparison game, and he missed Jesus. The only one that we dare compare ourselves with is Jesus Christ, and that's a standard that we often fall short of. But God reaches out to pull us to where he is, to conform us to his image. If we feel any inadequacy, he provides what we lack. If we feel any pride in our own accomplishments, he reminds us that we have no basis for it. One way to miss out on victory that's already yours is to fall into that trap of comparison. Another way to miss out on the victory that God has for us is, number 2, laziness. You can tell from Joshua's answer to the tribes of Joseph in verse 15 that he perceived that they didn't want to put in the work of clearing the forest and defeating the people who lived in that area of their land. They were too lazy to do the work that needed to be done to claim the victory that God had for them. Throughout my few years in the church, I have found that people do a really wonderful job of disguising laziness as spirituality. You start talking about being innovative and intentional about the work of the church, and all of a sudden they get really pious and they'll say something like, well, we just need revival. It's true, we do need revival, but sometimes that gets said and it's code for, I'm too lazy to put in the work, and I just hope that God's going to come and do it all for me. But that isn't how God works. It isn't how the church works. It isn't how revival works. You remember the story about the Israelites facing the Moabites in the wilderness of Edom? God promised them victory, but first they had to get down in the valley and they had to dig some ditches. They had to do some work. And God did give them victory. In Luke 19, Jesus tells the parable of the 10 talents. The boss leaves them for a while, and these are his words. What does he say? Occupy till I come. Christ will return one day. He wants us busy until he gets back. He promises his church victory, but if we want to be a part of it, we've got to put in the work. That's why we put emphasis on things like prayer and revival and the power of the Holy Spirit. And it's why our church should put an emphasis on being strategic about fulfilling the purpose of the church. Why we're having strategic planning. We're in a battle. We got to strategize. It's strategy. We make sure that we're intentionally busy about the work that God has called us to do, not just sitting around and waiting on God to somehow come and just do all the work for us. When we pray for the power of the Holy Spirit, what do you think that power is for? What do you think we're praying for when we ask for God's power? Just to sit there and revel in it and enjoy it? Jim Cymbala said, God didn't send the Holy Spirit to give us thrills and chills. He sent the Holy Spirit to empower us to make disciples. God blesses us with the power of the Holy Spirit so that we can be more effective in the work that He calls us to do. And the work that He calls us to do is to go into all the world and make disciples. You ever been in a service where you just get a special sense of God's presence? The power of the Holy Spirit has come down, and you kind of think, man, I just don't even want to leave. I just want to stay here. I want to linger in it. And that's great, and it's good. But that's not what it's for. Don't stay there forever. Revel in it, enjoy it, and let it empower you to get out of these doors and go make a difference in the world, in the ripened harvest fields. If you're not actively passionate about that, I'm not sure that you can even claim to be filled with the Holy Spirit. Because I believe when you sincerely seek God, you can expect spiritual victory. But you're going to miss out on it personally if you're not willing to put in the work. If you're not willing to be intentional and work hard at being a great commission-keeping disciple. You will miss out on the victory that God has for you if you allow laziness into your life. You'll also miss out on victory that's already yours if you give way to, number 3, fear. The tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh, they were afraid. The Bible tells us here they were afraid of the Perizzites and the Rephaim. And in verse 16, they tell Joshua they're afraid of the Canaanites who have chariots of iron. God had already promised them victory. They had already seen and experienced incredible victories that were brought about miraculously. And yet, when it came time for them to possess their part of the victory, their land, they froze in fear. You know, fear, it can paralyze us when we should be moving. The path to victory involves forward momentum. The problem is we've never been there before. And so many people are completely paralyzed by fear of the unfamiliar. And they never experience the full measure of victory that God has for them. Fear threatened to rob the Israelites of victory many times during this portion of their history. And when God was giving them victory in the land of Canaan, even in that time, fear was threatening to rob them of victory. They were afraid to cross the Jordan River. They said, we've never been this way before. Before that, they were afraid of the giants in the land. It paralyzed them when God's will was for them to have victory over those giants. Caleb understood. And in this same time frame that we're talking about today, when they were divvying out the land, Caleb comes up to Joshua and he asks Joshua for the hill country of the Anakim. Guess who the Anakim were? They were the giants who had frightened the people so many years ago. And I love it. Caleb understood that giving into fear could rob him of the victory that God could have for him. In fact, it almost seems like he embraced the challenge, doesn't he? He said, give me the hill country of the Anakim. It's like the words of a preacher that I read a while back. He said this, a wise bird knows that a scarecrow is simply an advertisement. It announces that something very juicy and delicious, some very juicy and delicious fruit is to be had for the picking. There are scarecrows in all the best gardens. We had a scarecrow in our garden, and we didn't have a scarecrow in our garden, and it wasn't a good garden, so that's probably what happened. He said, there are scarecrows in all the best gardens. If I am wise, I too shall treat the scarecrow as though it were an invitation. Every giant in the way, which makes me feel like a grasshopper, is only a scarecrow beckoning me to God's richest blessings. He goes on to say this, faith is a bird which loves to perch on scarecrows. All our fears are groundless, he says. The very things that the tribes of Joseph were afraid of were the things that were going to make their victory that much sweeter. They were the scarecrows that advertised the fact that there was something sweet and juicy on the other side. Are there giants or iron chariots or scarecrows in your path? Keep moving forward. Don't give in to fear. There's victory ahead, but fear will rob us of the victory that God has for us. There's one other way that you can miss out on victory that's already yours. It's an underlying theme through all of this, and it isn't explicitly stated in the passage, but it's there. You can miss out on victory that God has for you by not understanding obstacles as part of God's will for your life. Somehow I accidentally put number 5 here. You didn't miss point number 4. That is point number 4. Just has a 5 there. That was an accident. Joshua, he listens to all of their complaints. He hears their comparison. He sees right through their laziness and fear, and his orders don't change. He still challenges them to clear the forest and drive out the Canaanites. Joshua understood something that the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh needed to learn. God's will for my life will contain obstacles. It is God's will for your life for you to face trials and difficulties. It is God's will for your life, for you to face trials and difficulties. Some people experience victory and they think, this is great. It's great serving Jesus. And then they come up on an obstacle, a trial, a valley, and they think, this isn't supposed to be. I'm serving God. How could this happen? It's not fair. And sometimes if they're very weak in their faith, they even turn from God. If that's your mentality, you don't understand that obstacles are an intentional part of God's will for your life, you will miss out on victory. And believe it or not, God allows difficulties into our lives because he loves us. He includes obstacles in his plan for our lives to refine our character and to push us to trust him wholeheartedly. Not understanding obstacles as part of God's plan for your life will cause you to miss out on victory that's already yours. Victory. It's a beautiful word. I love it. To live life in Christ is to live in victory. It's amazing that God offers something so incredible to his followers. God intends for his church to be victorious. But if we want to enjoy the full measure of victory that God makes available to us, we're going to have to be sure that we're thinking right and living right. Otherwise, we'll miss out on victory that's already ours. Don't compare. Don't fall into the trap of comparison. Don't compare yourself or your walk or your individual victory with others. Compare yourself to Christ. Let him give you the humility and the strength to be all that you should be. Don't be lazy. We can't do anything without God's help. But if we don't do anything, what's he going to help us with? Don't give in to fear. Fear will rob us of the victory that God has for us. Accept the challenge and understand if there's a scarecrow in your path, there's something good on the other side of it. Understand that obstacles are a part of God's will for your life. When he has tried you, he wants you to come forth as gold. He wants you equipped for vibrant, victorious service. I'm praying that this year will be a year filled with spiritual victory for our church. Don't miss out by falling into the traps of comparison, laziness, fear, and a misunderstanding of trials. Stay faithfully and humbly surrendered to his leadership and trust him for a wonderful year marked by his presence and power. Would you stand with me this morning?